see how the day plays out. So this is the last of the material for the last exam. Respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems is what we have left. We do respiratory system first, and of all of them, this one's probably the most difficult because the physiology is a lot more complex. With the reproductive system, very straightforward. Sperm through its steps, female reproductive system. Female reproductive system is a little bit more involved than a guy. They have not only the egg development, but uterine system or the uterus development as well. So the uterine cycle. So, but it's really straightforward. We'll talk a little bit about how the external genitalia are created as well. So there's a little bit there, but it's all very straightforward. Digestive system, very straightforward. We'll talk a little bit about smooth muscle contraction. We'll talk a little bit, at least I think, and I've kind of skimmed it out a little bit. We will go over some digestive capabilities, where digestion occurs and how it occurs a little bit. But for the most part, we leave that to nutrition class. So if you have to have nutrition class, take it. I teach it. It's fun. We dive into that a little bit more there where we talk about those processes. Urinary system is interesting. It has evolved and changed over time and how it is discussed at this level. There are a multitude of various different things that happen there, but we're just going to look at some of the major components of urine formation. But when it comes to this one, the respiratory system, there is a lot that goes on. There's actually a lot of mechanisms involved in ensuring oxygen moves the right way, carbon dioxide moves the right way, hydrogen ions move the right way, because this is going to help to maintain pH balance within the body. Then we have various different mechanisms that can affect the rate at which we breathe, just like it can affect the rate at which the heart contracts. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And this lecture is actually like 300 slides long. So I've really done yeoman's work to try to get this down just to 100 slides. And a lot of these slides are questions anyway. So even getting it down to what we did is a pretty decent work here. So I've really streamlined a lot of this stuff. So let's jump into the respiratory system. There's going to be a lot of commonality here between what we just saw with the cardiovascular, with the heart and the blood vessels, with blood pressure. So hopefully some of it will jive a little bit. When it comes to respiratory system, the primary goal, guys, is going to be right here, gas exchange. This is what we are primarily gearing to talk about. The histology is all geared to gas exchange, okay? Protection and then allowing gas exchange. We have a couple different types of mechanisms of gas exchange, internal and external. Internal gas exchange is really what happens within a capillary bed. And we've hinted at that already. External respiration is really what happens within the lungs. And there's been a lot of terminology change over just the past year. So I've tried to clean that up within the note set here. And if for some reason I say a word that is not listed on the slide in terms of how I'm describing something, somebody just chat in the chat box. I'll see it pop up and I can correct myself, okay? Because there's a lot of terminology that has changed in this last little unit in terms of respiratory system and urinary system. When we look at the general functions of the respiratory system, I mean, right there, gas exchange. That's number one. Getting oxygen in, getting CO2 out, right? That is the ultimate goal of the respiratory system. But we do a number of other things as well, okay? We smell. This will be involved in detecting odors. Did we look at this already? Yeah, we did. We looked at it when we looked at the special senses. So I'm not going to really get into it anymore. I may make reference and note of it a little bit later, but we're not getting into this because we already have. It's involved with sound production. And we'll go into a little bit of this. It happens because of really right here. Well, really all of this up in the upper respiratory tract is going to be involved with it, but whereas actual sound made, that's going to be made within the larynx right here. Okay. Lastly, it gets air to move from the environment down deep into the lungs. We have an expansive network of tubes, as you can kind of see here, that branch and branch and branch and branch all the way down to where gas exchange does occur. So it helps to move air from the atmosphere down into the alveoli. Now, I don't believe I have it written anywhere, but we have a divider of what's called the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. The easiest way to think about this is really everything in the chest is usually associated with the lower respiratory system. Okay, so if you have a lower respiratory tract infection, they're talking about something in the lungs, generally. Trachea, bronchial tree, lungs, that's what we're talking about. The upper respiratory tract is everything that's up and out of the chest cavity. That's generally what it means. All right. Now, this book, I believe, has the larynx in the lower respiratory tract. Okay. To me, technically, that's out of the chest, but that's where they have it in this one. In some books, the larynx will be associated with the upper respiratory tract. Who cares? Right? I mean, literally, who cares? The larynx is the line of demarcation. The larynx is the line of demarcation between the upper and the lower. Okay? The larynx is really the last, we'll find out in the digestive tract. It's going to be that last choice for where food and water and air gets decided where it's going to go. Food and water, flap closes called the epiglottis, gets all that to go down into the esophagus. And now we're in the digestive tract. No air, or I'm sorry, no water, no food, epiglottis stays open, and that air comes down into the trachea and gets down deep into the lungs. Okay. So the larynx is that line of demarcation between upper and lower. Who you want to associate it with just depends on how you view it. For me, I view it everything in the chest is lower, everything out of the chest is upper. That's a structural organization. Okay. They can also usually organize it according to function, and honestly, I don't do that. We have what's called a conducting zone and a respiratory zone. A conducting portion and a respiratory portion. The conducting portion is literally everything. Nose, pharynx, trachea, the bronchial tree, all the way down to the really respiratory bronchial, alveolar duct, and the alveoli. This is where gas exchange occurs. Where gas exchange occurs. Okay. And that is the respiratory zone. Okay. So when it comes to function, I mean, it's very boring. Okay. Conducting portion, it conducts air to where gas exchange occurring. Where does gas exchange occur? Well, it's in the alveoli, but the respiratory bronchial, the alveolar duct, and the alveoli are technically the respiratory zone. So there's a structural organization, there's a functional organization. Don't spend 17 hours just looking over that little tidbit of information, okay? There is a ton of there's a ton of different types of histology within the respiratory system. It goes from, obviously, right, you can stick your finger in your nose. So I'm going to need something that can help to protect against that abrasive force, right? So I'm going to have a lot more stratified squamous epithelium, and then it's going to transition over into a pseudostratified, and then it's going to slowly get smaller and thinner as I continue down through the conducting portion into the respiratory portion. So we have a vast array of different forms of epithelium within the respiratory system. Okay. Again, much more stratified up into the nose. Then when we get into the trachea, it'll start to become what's called pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And then as we descend through the bronchial tree, you can see they'll get much more smaller and simpler, simpler, and simpler. Okay. You may see it, and I didn't see it in this textbook. It was in the previous one. It's sometimes referred to the respiratory epithelium as the mucociliary escalator. And that's just because we have a number of cilia within that pseudostratified columnar epithelium. We have goblet cells. Goblet cells secrete mucus. Okay. And all of those cilia beat upwards towards the mouth. So anytime you inhale anything, any particles, inhale any foreign invader, they get trapped into the mucus. And then the cilia beats it up towards the mouth. And then you can either spit it up or swallow it back down again. All right. But that's the mucociliary escalator. So it's this way to help protect the body, right? It is open to the outside world. So I hope that you remember membranes from way back when, the very beginning of the semester. And if we have an opening to the outside world, that's always going to be a mucus type of membrane because it helps to trap any foreign invaders that may get in it. There's goblet cells. Okay. They produce mucus. Again, you know, what does mucus do? You all know mucus. Trust up. I just put 1 to 7 tablespoons produced daily just because I think that's fascinating. There's no way I'm going to ask that on the exam. I just find it fascinating that you produce 7 tablespoons of mucus, between 1 and 7 tablespoons of mucus daily. That is just crazy to me. I don't know. I think it's crazy. But here you can kind of see how it gets progressively, you know, much more lesser and lesser and lesser. See the goblet cells get less and less and less. I mean, I hope it makes sense in the alveoli where gas exchange occurs. That's where you would want that to be 1 layer thick. It ensures it happens really quickly, easily, no mucus. You don't want a layer of mucus there. That would prevent it. And by it, I mean gas exchange. There's a number of defensive stuff. I don't know if I'd ask it. But there is a lot of defensive capabilities within the respiratory system. We have various different enzymes, antibacterial secretions, immunoglobulin A. Immunoglobulin A is found in all secretions anyway. So, and that's called sputum when you hack it up. But again, it's just a general word. I don't know if it can ask on the exam.